That Friday afternoon in suburban Virginia smelled of coffee and vanilla candles. The Miller house glowed in soft gold light, the kind that made everything look deceptively peaceful. Grace Miller was arranging a vase of white baby's breath on the granite countertop when she heard the click of high heels behind her. Sienna Brooks, her future daughter-in-law, stood there in a silk robe, her wedding dress hanging pristine behind her like a ghost of privilege. "The best gift you could give us," Sienna said, her smile too smooth to be sincere, "is to disappear from our family." Grace froze, one flower stem trembling between her fingers. She thought she'd misheard, but then her son, Ethan, looked up from his phone and didn't deny it. "Mom, it's our special weekend," he said quietly. "You've been negative." Negative. The word hit harder than she expected. She'd spent the morning setting up flowers, the afternoon confirming catering details, and the past year financing every dream Sienna had, from the marble counters to the $14,000 wedding reception. Grace swallowed hard. Negative? I gave you $86,000 for this house, my entire savings. All I asked was a room to stay in after your father died. Sienna's manicured fingers traced the rim of her coffee mug. That was a gift, wasn't it? You said you wanted to help us get started. A gift, Grace repeated. Her voice was even, but her heartbeat wasn't. That's how you see it. Ethan shifted, not meeting her eyes. It's more Sienna's house now. She's been handling the finances. You just helped once. Some money once. $86,000, reduced to a line on a spreadsheet. Grace looked around the kitchen. The counters she'd helped choose, the cabinets she'd ordered, the home she'd built for the son she'd raised alone. The air suddenly felt thick, heavy with betrayal. "Where exactly am I supposed to go?" she asked softly. Sienna shrugged, examining her nails. "A hotel? A friend's place? Your sister's? I don't really care, as long as you're not here tomorrow." Grace stared at her son, searching his face for a flicker of guilt, a hint of the boy who once cried when he scraped his knee. But all she saw was relief, as if he couldn't wait to be rid of her. "You're right," Grace said finally. Her tone was calm, almost gentle. "I should go." Sienna blinked, confused by the lack of a fight. She'd expected tears, pleading, drama to fuel her victim story. Instead, Grace set down the vase, wiped her hands, and walked upstairs. The guest room, Sienna called it. Never Mom's room. Guests, after all, eventually leave. Grace packed her few clothes, folded neatly into a single suitcase. Through the floorboards, she heard their voices. Sienna suggesting the room could become a yoga studio. Ethan agreeing it would make a perfect office. Grace paused at the nightstand. Her late husband Daniel smiled from a photo frame, frozen mid-laugh. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I'm not done yet." Downstairs, she carried her bag past the glittering chandelier she'd paid for. The front door clicked shut behind her like a verdict. In the car, Grace dialed a number she hadn't used in months. "Monica Grant," answered the familiar voice of her lawyer. "Monica, it's Grace Miller. I need you to pull the house documents, all of them." "Grace, what's going on?" "They told me to disappear. I plan to, but not empty-handed." Monica hesitated. "You don't remember signing those addendums I sent when you mentioned concerns about Sienna's spending?" "No. Why?" "Because that down payment wasn't a gift," Monica said slowly. "Legally, it's a loan. You're listed as a 35% co-owner on the deed." For a moment, Grace couldn't breathe. "Are you serious?" "Completely. They never returned the acknowledgement forms, but you're on every record that matters." Through the windshield, Grace saw the glow of the house she'd bought. Inside, Sienna was twirling in her veil, laughing into a video call. "Monica," Grace said, her voice steel now, "prepare a notice of intent to sell. First thing Monday morning." And then, because she wasn't quite finished, she made one more call. "Maple Ridge Country Club? This is Grace Miller. I'm canceling tomorrow's reception. But ma'am, there are 200 guests. I know. I signed the contract. I'll cover the cancellation fees. Hours later, at 11:47 p.m., her phone rang. Sienna's voice exploded through the speaker. What did you do? 200 people are expecting dinner tomorrow. Grace muted the TV and answered calmly. You wanted me to disappear. I did. There was a silence. Then Ethan's voice, panicked. Mom, this is insane. You can't cancel our wedding. I didn't cancel your wedding, Grace said, her tone soft and deadly. I canceled the party I paid for. The line went dead. Grace smiled faintly in the hotel's dim light. For the first time in years, she didn't feel powerless. She felt awake. Rain glazed the streets of Richmond that Monday morning, turning the sidewalks into mirrors of gray. Grace Miller sat in the waiting area of the police department, clutching a folder so thick it barely fit under her arm. Bank statements, receipts, legal documents, proof that generosity, when unchecked, becomes a weapon turned against you. Detective Marcus Harris appeared at the doorway, mid-40s, steady voice. Eyes that had seen too many family disputes. Mrs. Miller, please, come in. His office was plain. Fluorescent lights, an old desk, the faint smell of burnt coffee. He gestured for her to sit. We received a report from family members concerned about your well-being. Something about cognitive decline, possible financial exploitation. Grace's jaw tightened. I see. And which part of that story did they forget to mention? The $124,000 I've given them over the past 3 years. The detective blinked. Grace unlatched her folder and spread out the papers like a dealer revealing her winning hand. Here, she said. Every check, every transfer, every emergency they claimed they'd pay back. I covered their mortgage when Ethan's hours were cut. I paid their insurance premiums. I even paid the car repairs they blamed on bad luck. Harris studied the papers, tracing his finger down one column. That's substantial. Grace leaned forward, calm but sharp. It's called dependency, detective, not care. He flipped through another set of pages, emails from Monica Grant, Grace's attorney. You're a co-owner of their house? 35%, she confirmed. And the mortgage company lists me as co-borrower. They called it a gift. I call it an investment with no gratitude attached. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the hum of the air conditioner. Finally, Harris closed the folder and met her gaze. Mrs. Miller, I'm satisfied you're perfectly competent. This case will be marked as unfounded. Grace exhaled, not relief exactly, but something sharper, vindication. Thank you, detective. And just so we're clear, I'm not the victim of elder abuse. I'm the lender finally collecting her dues. When she stepped outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and bright. She sat in her car, watching droplets race down the windshield, and her phone buzzed. Ethan. Mom, the police called. They're not following up on the welfare check. Of course they're not, she replied, voice steady, because I'm not the one being financially abused. A pause. Then Ethan's voice lowered. Mom, please, can we just talk? Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Monica Grant's office. Bring your wife. Bring a proposal for how you plan to handle the house situation. That night, Grace checked into her hotel room, turned on the local news, and froze. The anchor's voice was chipper, but the story wasn't. A wedding disaster at Maple Ridge Country Club today, after a last-minute cancellation left guests stranded. Sources say the bride was seen in tears outside the venue. The footage showed Sienna, mascara streaking down her cheeks, surrounded by stunned bridesmaids. Grace didn't flinch. She let the moment wash over her like justice delayed, but finally delivered. At 2 p.m. sharp the next day, the law office of Monica Grant smelled of lemon polish and quiet authority. Grace sat across the mahogany table, hands folded neatly. The door opened, and Ethan entered first, pale and unshaven. Sienna followed, sunglasses hiding her swollen eyes. Monica powered on a projector. Let's go over the facts. Grace Miller provided an $86,500 down payment. The mortgage lists her as co-borrower. The deed confirms 35% ownership. Sienna's voice cracked. We didn't know that. I sent acknowledgement forms 3 times, Monica said evenly. You never returned them. I was planning a wedding, Sienna muttered. Monica raised an eyebrow. For 3 years? Ethan's voice shook. So what happens now? Grace answered before Monica could. You have 2 choices. Buy me out or sell the house. Sienna's jaw dropped. That's cruel. On our wedding week. Grace rose slowly from her chair, every movement deliberate. Cruel, she repeated, was telling the woman who paid for your dream wedding to disappear from your family. She walked to the window, the afternoon sun casting a long shadow behind her. You wanted a new beginning without me? Fine. But you'll pay the real price now, without my money. As she left the office, Monica's voice followed softly. Grace, that was necessary. Grace didn't turn back. No, Monica, she said, a hint of satisfaction threading her tone. That was overdue. Outside, a gust of wind lifted the fallen leaves from the courthouse lawn. Grace tightened her coat and smiled to herself. They wanted to play hardball. She'd just picked up the bat. The conference room smelled of lemon polish and tension. Papers were spread across the long mahogany table. Credit card statements, restaurant bills, luxury store receipts. Grace Miller sat at the head of the table, hands folded neatly, like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. Across from her, Ethan and Sienna avoided eye contact. Ethan's phone calculator glowed faintly as he punched numbers that didn't make sense. Sienna stared at the floor, her fingers fidgeting with her engagement ring. Their lawyer, Monica Grant, clicked her pen once and began. Your combined household income is roughly $8,000 a month, Monica said, scanning the printouts. Yet you're spending nearly $12,000. That's not a shortfall. It's self-delusion. Grace leaned forward, her voice calm but cutting. You don't have a money problem. You have a discipline problem. Sienna bristled. We're exhausted, Grace. We work hard. Sometimes we need takeout. Grace's expression didn't change. You don't work, Sienna. Not yet. A heavy silence fell. Outside the window, a tree branch scraped against the glass like a slow metronome. Monica flipped to another page. Your mortgage is $2,400. 2 car payments, insurance, shopping, streaming subscriptions, dining out. She trailed off, shaking her head. At this rate, you're drowning. Ethan tried to steady his voice. We can't afford to buy you out, Mom. Not at full value. Grace nodded slowly. I know, which is why I'm giving you one final option. Both of them looked up, desperate for mercy. You can repurchase my 35% share for $75,000, less than market value. But there will be strict conditions. Sienna frowned. Conditions? Grace tapped the table once for emphasis. First, Sienna gets a job within 60 days and keeps it for at least 2 years. Second, you sell one of your cars to pay off part of your debt. Third, no more eating out, no more impulsive shopping, no new subscriptions. You cook, you save, you plan. She leaned back, voice low and firm. And fourth, you'll send monthly financial statements to Monica. If you break any of these conditions, the discounted buyout is void. You'll owe me the full market value immediately. Sienna's eyes widened in disbelief. That's insane. You're putting us in financial prison. Grace tilted her head, her tone almost kind. No, Sienna. That's called accountability. Ethan rubbed his temples, exhausted. Mom, we can't live like that. Grace's lips curved faintly. Then you can sell the house. For a long minute, no one spoke. The ticking wall clock filled the silence. Finally, Ethan straightened in his chair. We accept, he said quietly. Sienna turned to him, her voice cracking. Ethan, we can't, he cut her off. We have to. Monica began drafting the agreement, her pen scratching over paper with surgical precision. She read each clause aloud, and the weight of every word hung heavy in the air. When she finished, she slid the document across the table. "Sign here," she said. Ethan signed first, his hand trembling. Sienna hesitated, then pressed the pen down, her signature sharp and uneven. Grace watched silently, her gaze steady but not cruel. As Monica collected the papers, Sienna whispered, almost to herself, "I can't believe you're doing this." Grace finally met her eyes. "I'm not doing this to you, dear. I'm doing this for you." The young woman's face flushed with a mix of shame and anger. She didn't respond. Grace rose, smoothing her jacket, and looked out the tall window, where the last light of afternoon glowed faintly against the city skyline. "Kindness without limits," she said quietly, "only teaches people to take more." Monica slipped the signed pages into a folder. "You know," she said softly, "I can't tell if that was generous or ruthless." Grace smiled faintly. Maybe both. When she stepped outside, the winter wind carried the scent of rain and asphalt. For the first time in years, Grace felt weightless. Not because she'd won, but because she'd finally stopped carrying everyone else's burden. Behind her, in that quiet room, her son and his wife had just signed the first contract of their adult lives, one that required character, not comfort. And for Grace Miller, that was victory enough. 6 months later, the air in Richmond carried that gentle scent of renewal. Fresh-cut grass, coffee shops reopening their patios, the whisper of spring. Grace Miller leaned over her small balcony, watching the pond outside her new senior community shimmer in the morning light. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't even large, but it was hers. Every inch of it paid for with peace of mind. Her phone rang. The caller ID read Sienna Brooks. For a moment, Grace considered letting it go to voicemail, but something in her chest softened. She answered. "Grace?" The voice on the other end was hesitant, almost unrecognizable. "I got promoted. Office manager at Dr. Jensen's dental clinic." Grace smiled. "That's wonderful, Sienna. Congratulations." "I just wanted to say," Sienna's voice trembled, "I owe you an apology. A real one. I was cruel, entitled. I treated you like an ATM and called it love." Grace leaned against the railing, the breeze lifting the silver strands of her hair, "and I allowed it, until I didn't." There was a small laugh on the other end, shaky but genuine. Turns out, saying no can be the best gift you give someone. Grace let the silence linger, a quiet acknowledgement of how far they'd all come. "You sound lighter." "I am," Sienna admitted. "Working, budgeting, actually earning what I spend. It's humbling, and it's freeing." Before hanging up, Sienna asked softly, "Would you, maybe, come for dinner sometime? Nothing fancy, just spaghetti, homemade. Maybe we could start again." Grace paused, the old impulse to say yes tugging at her heart. "Let's start smaller," she said gently. "Lunch, in a public place, baby steps." Sienna didn't argue. "Whatever you're comfortable with." After the call, Grace brewed herself a cup of tea and opened her messages. A new text blinked on the screen, from Barbara Brooks, Sienna's mother. "Heard about the promotion. Thank you for not bailing her out." Grace smiled, typing back, "Thank you for tearing up that check." Barbara had shown up 2 months earlier, wine in hand, eyes tired but kind. She'd confessed how she'd spent nearly 4 decades rescuing her daughter from every mistake. "When Sienna asked me for $25,000 to buy out your share," Barbara had said, holding up the torn halves of a check, "I finally said no, maybe for the first time in my life." That conversation had changed everything. 2 mothers finally stopped saving their grown children, and somehow saved them instead. Now, as Grace walked down the stone path toward the community garden, she felt the kind of calm that didn't need permission. She knelt beside a bed of lavender, pressing her fingers into the cool earth. Dirt under her nails felt honest, grounding. Beside her, another resident chuckled. "You plant like you mean it," Grace grinned. "I do." That evening, she opened her journal and wrote a single line. "Love with no boundaries breeds entitlement. Love with boundaries builds character." A week later, she met Ethan and Sienna for lunch at a small Italian cafe near the river. They looked different, leaner, quieter, as if life had finally sanded down their arrogance. Ethan spoke first. "We paid off 2 credit cards, sold the second car. Sienna handles the bills now. We're learning." Grace nodded approvingly. "Proud of you both." Sienna's eyes filled. "We couldn't have done it without the lesson you forced us to learn." Grace reached for her glass of water, her voice soft but steady. "You did it because you had to. Necessity is a better teacher than comfort." They laughed lightly, awkward but sincere. No grand reconciliation, no tears. Just 3 people eating pasta, finally speaking to each other as equals. That night, back at her apartment, Grace stepped out onto the balcony again. The sunset painted the pond in hues of copper and rose. Somewhere behind her, the television murmured about storms expected next week. She thought of Daniel, her late husband, and the house she'd once built for others who never saw its worth. Now, she was building something quieter, a life measured not by what she gave away, but by what she kept for herself. She whispered into the wind, almost to him, "When I took away the safety net, they learned to stand. And when they stood, I learned to rest." The first stars appeared, faint but determined. Grace closed her eyes and smiled. For the first time in years, she felt not needed, but respected. Not used, but seen. And that, she thought, was the truest kind of family.